The first time that I ever even thought about personally fasting was probably about 18 years ago. I'd been following Jesus for, about 20 years by that point, and I had always read in the Bible about how Jesus went into the desert and he fasted for 40 days, and I thought to myself, okay, there's no way I can possibly do that, so fasting is clearly not a thing for me, and I just kind of ignored it. Until I came to this verse in Matthew chapter 6 where it says, when you fast, and then Jesus gives some directions. And this particular time, it hit me really hard because the assumption Jesus was making was that I would be fasting, and I wasn't. And from that time until this, every time I think about fasting, there's a group of questions that kind of jump to mind whenever I'm getting ready to fast. And one of those questions that comes to mind every single time is why? Because this does not sound fun. So why would I possibly want to fast? That very first time that I fasted, I gave up food and drinking for a day and spent that time that I normally would spend eating and drinking, reading my Bible and praying and trying to make room for God. But why do that? Food is good. I like food. I like food a lot. So why would I possibly spend time giving up something that is good and that I like? Until I come to this verse. This verse that I'm about to read you is one of the things that typically answers this question for me. And this is a verse from Matthew chapter 9. And it says, "One day the disciples of John the Baptist came to Jesus and asked him, 'Why don't your disciples fast like we do and the Pharisees do?' And Jesus replied, 'Do wedding guests mourn while celebrating with the groom? Of course not. But someday the groom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast.'" Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes Jesus will say something, and my first response is, "What?" And that's the point. A lot of times Jesus will say something, and he's trying to say it in a way that makes us stop and think. And this is one of those verses that we're forced not to just say, "Oh, okay, yeah, I get that, I can move on." But instead, we have to actually take a minute and think about what Jesus is saying. And so the image that Jesus gives us of fasting starts with the idea of a wedding and a celebration, a giant feast where somebody really important and special is. So imagine, have you ever been to one of those restaurants where they put up on the wall all the pictures of the famous people who've eaten in the restaurant? I love going to those and seeing who all the people are, but imagine walking into a restaurant and somebody really famous that you think is amazing is sitting right there eating in your favorite restaurant when you walk in. And furthermore, imagine for a moment that whoever it is, he or she sees you walking in the door and looks over at you and says, "Hey, you know what? I have an extra spot. Why don't you come and eat with me?" Well, in that moment, when you are sitting there eating with this famous person, this would not be a moment that you would decide not to have a meal, right? You're in a restaurant, you are celebrating with this person that you think is absolutely amazing, and so you're just gonna have the funnest time you possibly can because that's the point. And Jesus is saying now, in a moment like that, obviously you wouldn't fast. That wouldn't make any sense. And the point he's trying to make is that the role he plays in the life of his disciples in that moment is that he is the center of the party. He is the most wonderful, most amazing person you could have ever met. And they got to spend every minute of every day with him. And he says, "But someday I'm going to be gone. Someday I'm not going to be physically present with my followers, and then they're going to fast." So why are they going to fast? They're going to fast because they want Jesus in their lives. It's very different from before Jesus. People would fast all the time. This verse mentions the Pharisees and John's disciples fasting, and people like that would fast because they thought it was really important to make sure that God understood we're serious about wanting your forgiveness and your leadership in our lives. And so they would fast in order to sort of impress God with how much they desperately wanted forgiveness and leadership in their lives. And Jesus isn't looking to have us fast in order to impress him. He's not looking to have us fast in order to make sure that he understands that we're serious. All of that in our relationship with God is taken care of by the fact that he was serious about us. He did everything necessary for us to experience his forgiveness and leadership when he died for us on the cross. And so we don't fast to impress God. We fast to make room for God in our lives. We fast to make sure that we are clearing some extra space in our life by letting go of things that are good and fun and enjoyable and important in order to make sure that we have extra space to make sure that we are prioritizing God. Because we know that when we put God in the right place in our lives, wonderful, amazing things happen. Our future changes, our present changes, our attitude changes, our relationships change. When God is in the right place, everything else changes. And so we take moments of fasting to be moments when we invite God into our lives, not on just a normal level, but on a special, extra level.